The night sky blazed with an unusual light as Princess Nari's escape pod tore through Earth's atmosphere. What had started as a routine diplomatic journey had turned into a nightmare when explosions ripped through her royal transport. She barely had time to reach the emergency pod before the ship broke apart. Warnings blared inside the cramped escape vessel as it plummeted toward the surface of a backwater planet called Earth. Nari clutched the seat restraints, her silver-blue skin glistening with sweat. The Galactic Hegemony had always dismissed this planet as primitive, hardly worth diplomatic contact. Now it would be her grave. Hull integrity failing, the pod's AI announced in the musical language of her people. Oxygen recyclers damaged. Life support critical. The pod crashed through a dense forest, bouncing off massive trees before skidding to a halt in a snowy clearing. The impact threw Nari against the restraints, leaving her gasping for breath in the thin air. Blood the color of pale amethyst trickled from a cut on her forehead. Atmosphere analysis complete, the AI continued dispassionately. Local air composition. Contains sufficient oxygen but includes nitrogen levels toxic to hegemony physiology. Survival probability, 12% and falling. Nari tried to activate the distress beacon, but the communications array had been shattered in the crash. She was stranded on a hostile planet with no way to call for help. As the pod's life support systems flickered and died, the temperature inside began dropping rapidly. Nari felt her consciousness fading as her body struggled against the alien atmosphere leaking in through the damaged hull. "So this is how the seventh daughter of Emperor Tay dies," she whispered. "Not in glory, but forgotten on a primitive world." Miles away, Day looked up from chopping wood as a streak of light cut across the Alaskan sky. Most would have thought it a meteor, but Day had spent enough time in military service to recognize something different about its trajectory. Too controlled, too deliberate. He grabbed his pack and rifle, whistling for his dog, Sul, to follow. 3 years since he'd walked away from civilization, choosing the peace of the wilderness over the chaos of human society. 3 years of self-sufficiency and solitude, interrupted only by this anomaly in the night sky. The trek through the snow-covered forest took nearly 2 hours. Sol found it first, barking excitedly at the strange metal object half buried in disturbed snow. Day approached cautiously, his breath forming clouds in the bitter cold. This was no weather satellite or crashed drone. The design was like nothing he'd ever seen, with smooth lines and materials that seemed to shimmer despite the darkness. "Hello?" he called out, not really expecting an answer. "Anyone alive in there?" A faint light pulsed from within. Day brushed away snow from what appeared to be a viewport and peered inside. What he saw made him step back in shock. A woman. No, not a woman. Something humanoid, but clearly not human. Silver-blue skin, delicate features, and hair that seemed to contain the colors of a deep ocean. She was slumped over, clearly injured, her chest barely moving. Day had seen enough people near death during his military days to recognize the signs. Without help, this strange visitor wouldn't survive the night. He searched for some kind of door or hatch, finding a panel that slid open after he applied pressure to various points. The air that escaped carried a strange, sweet smell. Inside, warning lights flashed across panels covered in symbols he couldn't understand. The temperature was dropping fast as the pod's systems failed. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said, reaching in to check for a pulse on the strange being's neck. Her skin felt cool and smooth, almost like fine silk. A pulse fluttered weakly under his fingers, fast and irregular. Making a quick decision, Day carefully lifted her from the pod. She weighed surprisingly little, as if her bones were hollow. Her clothing was thin, clearly not designed for Earth's harsh winter. He wrapped his heavy coat around her and began the journey back to his cabin. The alien woman stirred. Halfway there, eyes fluttering open to reveal irises the color of burnished gold. She spoke words Day couldn't understand, her voice musical but weak. "It's okay," he said, knowing she wouldn't understand him either. "I'm trying to help." Back at his cabin, Day laid her on his bed and stoked the fire to raise the temperature. Her breathing was shallow and labored. Years of wilderness first aid and combat medicine kicked in as he assessed her condition. Hypothermia, possibly internal injuries, and something was wrong with her breathing. as if the air itself was hurting her. He remembered the strange, sweet smell from the pod. Maybe she needed a different air mixture. Thinking quickly, Day rigged an oxygen concentrator he kept for high-altitude climbing. It wouldn't be perfect, but it might help. Through the night, he kept watch as she drifted between consciousness and unconsciousness. When she shivered violently, he piled on blankets. When fever took hold, he used cool compresses. When she seemed to struggle most with breathing, he adjusted the oxygen flow. By dawn, her condition had stabilized somewhat. Day sat back, exhausted, but satisfied. His military trainers would have laughed to see his advanced medical training being used on an alien, but the principles were the same. Keep them breathing, keep them warm, keep them fighting. The alien woman's eyes opened as morning light filtered through the cabin windows. This time they stayed open, focusing on Day with a mixture of fear and wonder. "You're safe," he said simply, offering a cup of water. She studied him carefully before accepting the cup, her movements elegant despite her weakened state. After a cautious sip, she touched her throat, then pointed to a small device partially hidden in the folds of her strange clothing. Day handed it to her, watching as her slender fingers adjusted something. The device hummed softly. "Thank you," she said, her voice accented but the words now clearly English. "You saved my life when all probability indicated my death was certain." Day smiled slightly. "Sometimes probability doesn't account for stubborn humans." The alien princess looked around the humble cabin with its wooden walls, simple furniture, and fire-heated interior. Her expression showed amazement at the primitive surroundings. "I am Nari, seventh daughter to Emperor Tay of the Galactic Hegemony," she said formally. "And you are?" "Just Day," he replied, adding more wood to the fire. "Welcome to Earth, Princess. I think you're in for quite a surprise about us primitives." Nari sat wrapped in rough wool blankets by the fireplace, watching as Day prepared a simple meal over the open flame. Her translator device had taken hours to repair, connecting wires with nothing but a small knife and steady hands. Now they could understand each other, though the situation remained surreal. "Your dwelling is—" Nari paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Interesting," Day laughed. "You mean primitive? It's okay, you can say it." "In the hegemony, no. One builds with organic materials anymore." She touched the wooden wall with fascination. "Everything is synthesized, sterile, perfect." "And boring?" Day suggested, stirring the pot of stew. "I would never say that officially." A small smile played at her lips. "But yes, perhaps a little boring." Nari's eyes drifted to the window, where snow was falling gently outside. The beauty of this wild planet surprised her. The hegemony educational. Programs had described Earth as underdeveloped and chaotic, but they'd failed to mention its raw beauty. "You still haven't explained why someone lives alone in the wilderness," she said. "Your species is social, isn't it?" Day's expression darkened slightly. "Used to be a soldier, saw things, did things, came back and couldn't fit in anymore. Everyone talking about trivial problems when I'd seen the worst of humanity." He shrugged. "Out here, things make sense. No politics, no lies, just survival." Nari nodded slowly. "I understand more than you might think. Royal courts aren't so different, just prettier cages." Their conversation was interrupted by a high-pitched beeping from the corner, where Day had stored the pieces of her escape pod he'd managed to drag back. The emergency locator beacon had suddenly activated. "That's not good," Nari said, her face paling to a lighter blue. "My pod wasn't supposed to broadcast unless manually activated. Someone has remotely triggered it." "Someone who wants to find you?" Day asked, already moving to gather his weapons. "Someone who wants to finish killing." "Me," she replied grimly. "The sabotage of my transport wasn't an accident." Day peered out the window, scanning the clearing around his cabin. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less. The hegemony doesn't have a presence in this system, but they could have dispatched recovery drones from nearby monitoring stations." Nari tried to stand but grimaced in pain. "We should leave. I've put you in danger." "Not going anywhere in your condition," Day said firmly, and running through snow leaves tracks. He moved with purpose around the cabin, gathering items that seemed random to Nari. Fishing line, small mirrors, pieces of metal, containers of liquid. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Setting up a welcome party." Day's eyes had changed, taking on a focused intensity that reminded Nari of the Royal Guards during combat drills. "These drones, what are their capabilities?" Nari described the standard recovery units: hover capability, thermal sensors, neural stun weapons, and basic artificial intelligence. They're designed to retrieve or eliminate targets efficiently. Advanced but predictable, Day nodded, thinking. They'll follow programming, not intuition. The next hour passed in a blur as Day worked outside the cabin, setting up a perimeter of traps. Nari watched from the window, amazed at how he used simple materials in creative ways. He covered fishing line with snow, positioned mirrors to reflect, heat signatures away from the cabin, and prepared choke points where the drones would be funneled if they followed their standard search patterns. "Technology has weaknesses," he explained when he came back inside, his breath visible in the cold air. "It only knows what it's programmed to know." The hegemony would consider this approach. "Quaint," Nari said, but there was newfound respect in her voice. "Let's hope they find it surprising too." They didn't have to wait long. Just before dusk, Sul began growling at the door. Dai motioned for Nari to stay down as he peered through a narrow gap in the window covering. "3 of them," he whispered. "Just like you described." The drones moved with eerie precision, hovering just above the snow in a search formation. Sleek and silver, they resembled flattened spheres with sensor arrays protruding from their tops. They emitted a soft humming sound as they approached the clearing. "They're scanning for life signs," Nari said quietly. "The thermal baffling won't fool them for long." Day grabbed his rifle and a small remote device he'd cobbled together. "Then we give them something else to focus on." He pressed a button, and a small heating element he'd hidden in a tree 50 yards away activated. All 3 drones immediately changed direction, moving toward the heat signature. The first drone triggered a tripwire, sending it spinning into a snowbank. The second avoided the wire but flew directly into a net Day had suspended between trees. The third drone, seemingly learning from its companion's mistakes, changed altitude and approached more cautiously. "They're adapting," Nari said with alarm. Day nodded grimly. They would. He raised his rifle and fired, not at the drone itself but at a branch heavy with snow directly above it. The snow dumped onto the drone's sensors, momentarily blinding it. "Now we move," he said, helping Nari to her feet. They slipped out the back of the cabin as the drones struggled against their primitive but effective traps. Day led them to a small cave he used for storage, hidden behind a natural formation of rocks. "They'll free themselves eventually," Nari said, her breathing labored from the short journey. "Counting on it," Day replied, pulling out a small device. That looked like a remote control. Left them a surprise. Back at the cabin, the freed drones converged on the structure, weapons ready. As they entered through different access points, they triggered Day's final trap. A simple electrical surge conducted through metal wire he'd strung throughout the cabin. The surge wasn't powerful enough to destroy the advanced technology, but it scrambled their sensor arrays long enough for a second trap to activate. Containers of highly flammable liquid broke, igniting from the sparks. From their hiding place, Dai and Nari watched as the cabin erupted in flames, the heat signature, now overwhelming the drone's already damaged sensors. "You're home," Nari said sadly. "You sacrificed it." Day shrugged. "Just wood and supplies. Can be rebuilt." In the hegemony, we would have deployed counter-drones or called for reinforcements. We're taught to solve problems by applying more advanced technology. "Sometimes the oldest tricks work best," Day replied, checking that the drones remained disoriented by the fire. "Your people have forgotten that technology is just a tool, not a solution by itself." Nari watched this human with growing fascination. The hegemony classified his species as primitive, yet he had disabled machines centuries beyond his understanding, using nothing but sticks, string, and clever thinking. "The assassins will send more," she said finally. "We need to contact my father." Day nodded, his eyes reflecting the distant flames. "There's a communication array about 2 days' hike from here. Old military installation. Abandoned, but maybe..." Still functional. You think we can adapt it to send a signal to the hegemony? Don't know, Day admitted, but seems we make a good team so far. You know technology, I know survival. Nari looked at this strange human who had saved her life twice. Now an unlikely alliance, but perhaps exactly what she needed. Yes, she agreed, a good team. As darkness fell, they prepared for the journey ahead, knowing the next wave of pursuers would not be so easily fooled. Dawn broke cold and clear as Dai and Nari prepared to leave the small cave. The smoke from the burned cabin still rose in the distance, a dark smudge against the pristine winter landscape. Day had spent the night fashioning snowshoes for Nari from flexible branches and strips of leather from his emergency pack. These will keep you from sinking into the deep snow, he explained, helping her strap them to her boots. It's going to be a hard journey. The communications array is on the other side of those mountains. He pointed to a jagged ridge that cut across the horizon. How did you find this array in the first place? Nari asked, testing her weight on the strange contraptions. Her movements were awkward but improving. Pure accident, Day admitted. Tracked a wounded moose up there last winter and stumbled across it. Big dish antenna hidden in a valley. Sign said government property and restricted access. Perfect place to hide something they didn't want found. They set out while the morning was still young, Day breaking trail through the snow with Saul trotting ahead, occasionally looking back as if checking that they were following. Nari struggled at first, her body still recovering from the crash and unaccustomed to Earth's gravity, but she pushed forward without complaint, her determination evident in every labored breath. Your world is so physical, she said after they'd been walking for several hours. In the hegemony, we've engineered most physical strain out of daily life. Transportation pods move us. Machines prepare our food. Environmental systems maintain perfect conditions. Day helped her over a fallen tree. Sounds boring. It's efficient, she countered, but her tone lacked conviction. Though I admit there's something real about this, about earning each step forward. They made camp that night in a small grove of pine trees that provided shelter from the wind. Day built a small fire, careful to keep it well hidden. As they ate a simple meal of dried meat and foraged roots, Nari asked about his military background. Special forces, he said simply. Trained to survive anywhere, adapt to any situation, complete the mission no matter what. Then why leave it all behind? Day stared into the flames. Last mission went bad, really bad, civilian casualties. His eyes grew distant. Followed orders that shouldn't have been given. Nari nodded slowly. And your superiors? Got promotions, Day said bitterly. That's when I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Walked away, came out here, been living off the land ever since. The hegemony doesn't allow such individual choices, Nari said. Everyone has their assigned place. Even princesses? Day asked. Especially princesses. She smiled sadly. I was en route to a diplomatic marriage when my ship was sabotaged. Seventh daughter means seventh alliance to secure. They fell silent, each contemplating paths not chosen. Above them, stars sparkled in the clear night sky, the same stars that held Nari's home somewhere in their vast expanse. The second day brought new challenges. The terrain grew steeper as they approached the mountains. By midday, Nari was visibly struggling, her silver-blue skin taking on a grayish tinge. She stumbled more frequently, and her breathing became shallow. We need to rest, Day said, helping her sit on a fallen log. No time, she insisted between gasps. The assassins will have sent more drones by now. Won't matter if you collapse. Day studied her with concern. You're sick. Nari touched her face, seeming surprised by the heat radiating from her skin. Earth pathogens, she concluded. My immunity system isn't designed for this planet. Do you have medicine? Day asked. In the pod, which is now ash. She attempted a smile that turned into a grimace. The hegemony would consider this quite ironic, a royal dying from simple bacteria. Day's expression turned thoughtful. Maybe not. He whistled for Saul, who bounded over immediately. Stay with her, boy. Day disappeared into the surrounding forest, returning 20 minutes later with a handful of various plants, leaves, roots, and what appeared to be tree bark. He quickly set about preparing them, crushing some into a paste and brewing others in hot water. "What are you doing?" Nari asked, her voice weak. "Old trick my grandmother taught me. She was half native." Day worked methodically. "This is white willow bark, natural pain reliever. These roots help fight infection. This moss draws out fever." Nari looked skeptical. "Plants? Against alien pathogens?" "Basic principles still apply." Dai shrugged. "Your body's fighting something. It doesn't recognize. These help boost that fight or ease the symptoms." He offered her a cup of steaming liquid. "Can't hurt to try." Nari hesitated, then took the cup. The liquid was bitter but not unpleasant. Day applied the moss paste to her forehead and wrists, explaining that it would help cool her down. They were forced to make camp early that day, as Nari was too weak to continue. Day built a small shelter from branches and leaves, creating a space that trapped body heat while allowing the fire's warmth to reflect inward. Through the night, he kept the fire burning and reapplied the herbal remedies every few hours. By morning, Nari's fever had broken. She woke to find Day asleep, sitting up, his back against a tree, still keeping watch. The realization of what had happened struck her suddenly. This human had saved her life again, using knowledge that her civilization would consider primitive folklore. "In the hegemony," she said when Day awoke, "we would have scanner-diagnosed the infection, synthesized a targeted antimicrobial and administered it via nanites. And if the scanners were broken, the synthesizers damaged?" Day asked. "Then, I suppose we would be helpless." The thought clearly disturbed her. "That's the difference," Day said quietly. "Humans have learned to adapt because we had to. Your people forgot the old ways because they could. They resumed their journey with renewed purpose." Nari seemed changed by her brush with death, more contemplative as she took in the rugged beauty around them. When a snowstorm forced them to shelter in a small cave, she didn't complain about the cold or discomfort. "My father believes humans aren't ready for contact with advanced civilizations," she told Day as they huddled near a small fire. "He says you're too aggressive, too unpredictable." "He's probably right," Day admitted. "We're a mess most of the time." "But there's something else," Nari continued. "Something the hegemony assessments missed. You're resilient in a way we're not. You know how to survive when everything fails." On the fourth day, they crested a ridge and looked down into a hidden valley. There, partially covered by snow and surrounded by trees that had grown up around it, stood a massive satellite dish. "There it is," Day said, relief evident in his voice. "Your ticket home." Nari gazed at the structure, emotions crossing her face too quickly to read. "Yes," she said finally. "Home." But as they made their way down the slope toward the communications, "Hurry!" Sol began to growl. Day motioned for Nari to drop to the ground just as a sleek black shuttle broke through the clouds above. "Looks like they've found us," Day said grimly, reaching for his knife. "And this time they sent people, not drones." Nari's eyes narrowed as she recognized the craft. Not just people, royal assassins, the best the hegemony has. "Great," Day muttered, already scanning for cover. "And here I thought this trip was getting too easy." The shuttle circled once before beginning its descent toward the array. Nari and Day exchanged looks. They were so close to their goal, yet now faced their greatest danger. "Any of your primitive tricks work against elite assassins?" Nari asked, her attempt at humor betrayed by the tension in her voice. Dai's expression hardened with determination. "I guess we're about to find out." The shuttle touched down in a swirl of snow, its engines humming with a power that made the air vibrate. Day and Nari watched from their hidden position behind a rocky outcropping as the hatch opened. 3 figures emerged, their forms sleek in fitted black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each wore a helmet with an opaque visor, completely hiding their features. "Royal executioners," Nari whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Elite killers, genetically enhanced for tracking and combat." "How many shots in those weapons?" Day asked, eyeing the sleek rifles the assassins carried. "Charged plasma." "Essentially, unlimited," Nari replied. "One hit would vaporize most of your body." Day took a deep breath. "Good to know." He studied the terrain between their position and the communications array. About 200 yards of open ground, then the small bunker housing the control systems. The assassins were spreading out, beginning a methodical search pattern. They can detect heat signatures and movement through solid objects, Nari explained. We can't hide for long. Then we don't hide. Day checked his rifle, knowing it would be nearly useless against their advanced armor. We need a distraction. He dug into his pack and pulled out several small bundles wrapped in cloth. Packed these for emergencies. He unwrapped one to reveal a small block of what looked like clay. What is it? Nari asked. Explosives, military grade. Seeing her surprised expression, he shrugged. Told you I didn't leave everything behind. Working quickly, Day outlined his plan. It was risky and depended on precise timing, but it was the only chance they had. As Nari listened, her expression shifted from doubt to grudging respect. That's either brilliant or suicide, she said finally. Probably both, Day admitted. Ready? With the plan set, Day moved silently through the trees, circling wide around the searchers. Saul stayed with Nari, the dog understanding his master's silent commands. Day placed his explosive charges strategically, not to kill but to create maximum confusion. When everything was ready, he returned to Nari. Remember, when the first one goes off, you run for the bunker. Don't stop, don't look back. What about you? I'll be right behind you. The lie came easily, but Nari wasn't fooled. No, you won't, she said quietly. You're planning to draw them away. Day didn't answer directly. The important thing is getting you to that communications array, contacting your father. Why risk your life for me? I'm not even your species. Day looked at her for a long moment. Some things cross all boundaries. Doing what's right is one of them. Before she could respond, he triggered the first explosive. The blast echoed across the valley, sending birds scattering from trees. As planned, the assassins immediately converged on the source of the explosion. Now, Day urged, and Nari sprinted toward the bunker, Sul racing alongside her. Day moved in the opposite direction, deliberately making noise. When the second explosive detonated, closer to his position, the assassins changed course, just as he'd intended. He caught a glimpse of them moving with inhuman speed through the trees, closing in on his position. Meanwhile, Nari reached the bunker door. It was locked, but the mechanism was simple, designed to keep out curious hikers, not determined. Aliens. Using techniques Day had shown her, she managed to force it open. Inside, the equipment was covered in dust but appeared intact. Banks of computers, control panels, and a massive transmitter connected to the satellite dish outside. Nari worked frantically, adapting Earth technology to connect with her translator device. The systems were primitive by hegemony standards, but the principles were the same. If she could boost the signal strength and modify the frequency. Outside, Day triggered his third explosive, drawing the assassins further from the bunker, but he knew he couldn't keep evading them for long. Their enhanced senses would eventually pinpoint his location. He just needed to buy Nari enough time. Inside the bunker, screens flickered to life as Nari managed to power up the ancient system. Her fingers flew across unfamiliar controls, the knowledge from her royal education proving unexpectedly useful. Earth computers were clumsy and slow, but she could work with them. "Please work," she whispered as she initiated the transmission sequence. Miles away, Day was running out of options. The assassins had adapted to his tactics and were now closing in from 3 directions. He triggered his last explosive, but they barely slowed. A plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, close enough that he felt its heat. Back in the bunker, Nari shouted with triumph as the communication system established a connection. The screen filled with static, then resolved into the image of an ornate chamber. A regal figure sat on an elevated platform, his skin the same silver blue as Nari's, though lined with age. "Father!" Nari cried out. Emperor Tai's expression shifted from diplomatic boredom to shock. "Nari, how? We received confirmation of your death 3 Earth days ago." "The reports were false, Father. My ship was sabotaged, but I survived the crash. Someone wants me dead, someone within the court." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Advisory Minister Jin assured me personally that search drones found your remains. Then Jin is behind this, Nari said. He must have ordered the sabotage and sent assassins to finish the job when I survived. They're here now, Father. Royal executioners. The Emperor's face darkened with rage. Only I can authorize executioners. Jin has committed treason. His expression softened as he looked at his daughter. But how did you survive on that primitive world? A human saved me, Father. He's kept me alive, treated my injuries, helped me reach this communication array. Nari's voice filled with emotion. Everything we've been told about humans is wrong. They're not just primitive savages. They're resourceful, adaptable. They possess wisdom we've forgotten. A crash from outside interrupted her. Through the bunker's small window, she could see Day pinned down behind a boulder, plasma fire raining around him. One of the assassins was moving to flank his position. Father, send help. Please, Nari begged. The Emperor hesitated. Centuries of protocol regarding non-interference with pre-spaceflight civilizations visibly weighing on him. Outside, Day realized he was trapped. The assassins had him surrounded, and his ammunition was nearly spent. But he had accomplished his mission. Nari had reached the bunker. She was safe, at least for now. With grim determination, he decided on a final, desperate move. If he could draw all three assassins to him, Nari might have a chance to escape into the forest. Taking a deep breath, Day broke from cover, firing his remaining bullets to force the assassins to duck. He sprinted toward the shuttle, hoping to reach its weapons or communication systems. Plasma bolts sizzled around him, one grazing his arm and leaving a scorched gash. The pain was immediate and intense, but he kept moving. Inside the bunker, Nari watched in horror as Day made his desperate run. Father, he's going to die. He's sacrificing himself for me, a stranger, an alien. The Emperor's expression changed as he watched the human's brave, futile charge displayed on a secondary screen. Such courage, he murmured. For a primitive... He's not primitive, Nari shouted. He's everything we should aspire to be. As Day collapsed, a plasma bolt having caught him in the leg, the Emperor made his decision. He barked orders to someone off-screen. Emergency jump to Earth coordinates, full battle complement, authorization, Imperial Omega. On the screen, Nari saw her father stand, his ceremonial robes swirling around him. I'm coming, daughter. Hold position. The transmission cut off as Day, crawling now, reached the shuttle ramp. The assassins approached cautiously, weapons trained on him. Through pain-blurred vision, he saw one remove their helmet, revealing features similar to Nari's, but harder, crueler. The princess can watch you die before we take her, the assassin said in accented English. A final lesson about the futility of primitive resistance. Day, despite the searing pain, managed to smile. You talk too much. He pressed a button on his wrist, detonating the final explosive he'd planted inside the shuttle's engine compartment. The resulting explosion knocked everyone to the ground, the shuttle erupting in flames. As darkness threatened to engulf him, Day saw Nari running from the bunker toward him, Sul at her side. Behind her, impossibly, the sky seemed to tear open, a swirling vortex of light forming out of nowhere. The last thing Day saw before consciousness left him was a massive ship emerging from the light, dwarfing anything human technology had ever created. The assassins, recovering from the blast, looked up in horror as smaller craft deployed from the larger ship, weapons already firing. Hold on, Day. Nari's voice seemed to come from very far away as she reached his side. My father is here. You did it. You saved me. Then darkness claimed him, and he knew nothing more. Day floated in darkness, pain a distant memory. Somewhere beyond the void, voices murmured in a musical language he didn't understand. Occasionally a word in English broke through: stabilizing, remarkable resilience, unprecedented healing rate. Time had no meaning here. Then, a familiar voice cut through everything else. I know you can hear me, Day. You've survived worse than this. Earth needs you to wake up. Nari. The alien princess. Day opened his eyes to blinding light. As his vision adjusted, he found himself in a room unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of flowing light, constantly, shifting in patterns of soft blue and silver. He lay on a bed that conformed perfectly to his body, supporting him while somehow feeling weightless. "There you are," Nari said, her face appearing above him. She looked different, regal in an intricately designed silver outfit, her hair adorned with what appeared to be living gems that pulsed with gentle light. "The medical AI gave you a 97% chance of full recovery. I told them it should be 100%. You're too stubborn to settle for anything less." Day tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Nari offered him a clear cup filled with a luminescent liquid. It tasted like mountain spring water, but somehow more. "Where am I?" he finally managed. "The Imperial flagship Eternal Dawn," Nari replied. "My father's personal vessel." Memory flooded back. The assassins, the desperate fight, the explosion. "Oh, your father. He actually came. Breaking about 17 major protocols in the process," Nari said with a smile. "The bureaucrats are still having fits about it." Day attempted to sit up and was surprised to find he could. The wound on his leg, which should have been severe, was now just a pale mark. His burned arm showed no signs of injury at all. "How long was I out?" 3 Earth days. "Our medical technology is quite effective, though the doctors were fascinated by your physiology. Apparently humans heal naturally at rates that would require genetic enhancements in my species." A soft chime sounded, and Nari straightened. "That would be father. He's been waiting to speak with you." The door, which Day hadn't even noticed until it moved, dissolved rather than opened. Through it walked a tall figure that could only be Emperor Tay. He had the same silver-blue skin as Nari, but his features were sharper, more angular. His eyes were deep gold, and he moved with the fluid grace of someone completely at ease with his own authority. Day attempted to stand, but the Emperor waved him back down. "Please conserve your strength," he said in perfect English. "You've done more than enough already." 2 guards flanked the doorway, their armor similar to the assassins, but in royal blue rather than black. They watched Day with undisguised curiosity. "Father," Nari bowed slightly. "This is Day, the human who saved my life." The Emperor studied Day with penetrating intensity. "My daughter has told me everything. How you found her, healed her, protected her at great personal risk." He paused. "The hegemony owes you a debt that cannot be easily repaid." Day shifted uncomfortably under the Imperial gaze. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," the Emperor said simply. "They would not. Even among my own people, such selflessness has become rare." Something like sadness crossed his face. "We've discovered the full extent of the plot against my daughter. My chief advisor, Jin, orchestrated everything." "Why target Nari?" Day asked. The Emperor exchanged a look with his daughter before answering. "The marriage Nari was traveling to would have secured an alliance with the Andromeda Federation, our longtime rivals. Jin opposed this peace. More importantly, he knew that after my other daughters, Nari was most likely to succeed me. She has always been," he smiled slightly, "difficult to control." "Jin wanted someone more pliable on the throne," Nari explained. "Someone he could manipulate." "We've arrested him and his conspirators," the Emperor continued. "But the damage to our internal security was substantial. Jin had been feeding me false information for years, particularly about Earth." He walked to a window that suddenly appeared in the wall. Beyond it, Earth hung in space, a swirl of blue and white and green that took Day's breath away. "Jin convinced the Council that humans were dangerous," the Emperor said. "Too volatile, too unpredictable to join galactic society. He presented reports showing your wars, your environmental damage, your social conflicts. What he omitted were your remarkable adaptability, your creativity under pressure, your capacity for selfless action." He turned back to Day. "Qualities the hegemony has been losing for generations." Day struggled to process everything. "So what happens now?" "Now," the Emperor smiled. "Now we correct a historic mistake. The standard protocol would be to wait until your species discovered faster-than-light travel before initiating contact. That could be centuries." "Father believes that's too long," Nari added, her eyes bright with excitement. "Indeed, the hegemony has grown complacent. stagnant even. We've engineered away struggle and, in doing so, lost something essential. The Emperor looked directly at Day. Your people still have it. A soft alert sounded, and one of the guards spoke quietly to the Emperor. It seems our guests have arrived, he said, earlier than expected. But humans tend to be punctual when summoned by alien spacecraft. Day's confusion must have shown on his face because Nari explained, Father sent a diplomatic envoy to your planet's leaders, just a small delegation to begin discussions. You're making first contact, Day asked, shocked. Just like that? The situation requires decisive action, the Emperor said simply. Would you join us? Your presence would be reassuring to your leaders. Still trying to process everything, Day found himself escorted to what appeared to be a conference room. Through another window wall he could see Earth's moon, impossibly close. Around a large circular table sat a dozen humans, military officers, government officials, and scientists, judging by their attire. All wore expressions ranging from awe to suspicion to barely contained excitement. A woman in a crisp uniform stood as they entered. Emperor Tay, we appreciate your willingness to meet with us directly. Her eyes widened slightly as she noticed Day. You must be the individual mentioned in the briefing, the one who made first contact. Before Day could respond, the Emperor spoke. This is Day, without whom this meeting would not be possible. He saved my daughter's life and in doing so, opened our eyes to the true nature of humanity. The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions and explanations. Day watched as two worlds took their first tentative steps toward understanding each other. The human delegation was understandably cautious, but increasingly receptive, as the Emperor outlined possibilities for cultural and scientific exchange. We propose a gradual integration, the Emperor explained. Beginning with diplomatic relations, followed by limited technology sharing in non-military sectors, medical advances, sustainable energy, space travel. An older scientist leaned forward. And what does Earth offer in return? We're centuries behind your development. The Emperor's response surprised everyone. Fresh perspective, innovation born of necessity, cultural vitality. He gestured toward Day. Your people solve problems differently than ours. You find paths we would never consider because we've grown too reliant on established solutions. After the initial discussions concluded, Day found himself alone with Nari and her father on an observation deck overlooking Earth. They took it better than I expected, Day admitted. Humans adapt quickly, the Emperor noted. Another quality. We admire. Nari approached Day, her expression serious. Father has a proposal for you. The Emperor nodded. The first phase of contact will require a liaison, someone who understands both worlds. Earth will select official ambassadors eventually, but for now we need someone who can bridge the gap. He looked at Day expectantly. Someone who has already proven their ability to work with us. Day stared in disbelief. Me? I'm not a diplomat. I'm just a human who survived against impossible odds, Nari interrupted. Just a primitive, who outsmarted our most elite assassins. Just a soldier who chose conscience over orders. Her eyes met his. You're exactly what both our worlds need right now. The choice is yours, the Emperor added, but know that your service would be invaluable. Day looked out at Earth, his home, a planet on the verge of transformation. Then he looked at Nari, who had somehow become important to him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. What about my cabin? He asked finally. And Sul? Nari smiled. Your dog is currently being spoiled by the royal caretakers. As for your cabin, we can arrange periodic returns to Earth, the Emperor said. You need not abandon your home entirely. Day thought about the life he'd built in isolation, peaceful but empty. Then he thought about the opportunity before him, challenging but meaningful. When do I start? He asked. The Emperor smiled. You already have. Later, as Earth's leaders prepared to return home with news that would forever change human history, Dai stood beside Nari on the observation deck. Your father really thinks this will work? Humans and their hegemony? It won't be easy, Nari admitted. Both our worlds will resist change, but sometimes the greatest strength comes from unlikely alliances. She looked at him. A primitive human and an alien princess proved that. Day watched as the blue planet turned slowly below them, unaware of how drastically its future had just changed. Somewhere down there, his small cabin lay in ashes, a past life abandoned for something he could never have imagined. "So," Nari said with a smile that had become familiar despite her alien features, "ready for your first official duty, Ambassador Day?" Day thought about all the events that had led him here, from war to wilderness to the stars. Life had a strange way of bringing purpose from chaos. "Lead the way, Princess," he replied, and together they walked toward a future neither of their worlds could have predicted. One built on the understanding that true strength comes not from technological advancement, but from the qualities that make us who we are, no matter what planet we call home.